All right, let's jump right in. We all learned in school how plants work, right? How they get water from the roots all the way up to the leaves. But what if that whole explanation, the one we've been using for over 100 years, is just wrong? Well, that's the wild idea we're digging into today, based on a paper that pretty much challenges everything we thought we knew about plant biology. And that's really the big question here, isn't it? The standard model for how plants move stuff around is like a pillar of biology, but the paper we're looking at argues that it's all built on this one huge overlooked contradiction. To get why, first we've got to understand the theory it wants to toss out. So, this is the textbook version. It's called the pressure flow hypothesis. In a nutshell, it says water gets pulled up from the roots because of evaporation happening in the leaves. At the same time, sugar gets pushed down from the leaves by high pressure that builds up during photosynthesis. You see, it's a two-part system, a pull and a push. And you know, these ideas are old, like really old. The whole pulling water up concept is from 1894. That's before we even knew what an electron was. The pushing sugar down part is from 1926, and for basically a century, this has been the final word on the subject. But according to our source, these old theories are just riddled with problems. So how many problems are we talking about here? It's not just one or two little things. The author of this paper points out eight major glaring issues that the standard model just can't seem to explain away. And we're not talking about small details either. These are huge, fundamental observations that just don't fit. Like, how can the sugar move faster than the water that's supposed to be carrying it? That doesn't make sense. Or how does this supposedly passive system overcome massive friction to move sap 40,000 times faster than diffusion would? These are the kinds of giant questions that hint at a much deeper flaw in the logic. But the biggest problem, the one the paper really hones it on, is a logical one. The standard model has two totally opposite forces working at the same time. You've got a pull for the water going up, driven by evaporation, and then you have a push for the sugar going down, driven by high pressure. They're two completely different opposing mechanisms. And this is the core of the argument. The author basically says, you can't have it both ways. A single, interconnected system just can't be running on a dominant pull from the top and a dominant push from the top at the exact same moment. It's a contradiction. So this is what the paper calls the fatal flaw. How on earth is a plant supposed to manage these two conflicting forces? The author's answer is simple. It doesn't. It can't. Because the whole model is wrong. And that opens the door to a completely different explanation. What if we've been looking at the wrong thing this whole time? Forget pressure and osmosis. What if plants are actually tapping into some fundamental, invisible force field that we've just completely missed, a force that's all around us all the time? The author gives this a name, the charge field. And the whole idea starts in a really unexpected place, Newton's famous equation for gravity. The theory claims that the gravitational constant g isn't just a number. Nope. It argues that g is actually hiding a huge, invisible field of photons that are constantly shooting upwards from the Earth. A steady, invisible, upward-moving river of energy. And the paper has this great analogy for what's happening. Think of it like an elevator. The sap isn't being pulled up, it's just taking a ride on this invisible charge field elevator, getting a constant push from below. Now, I know what you're thinking. If this field is pushing up on everything, why aren't we all floating away? Well, the paper says it's all about scale. For big things like us, gravity easily wins. But when you get down to the microscopic tubes inside a plant's xylem, the whole game changes, and this upward push from the charge field actually becomes the stronger force. So, if you could shrink down and measure the forces inside one of those tiny plant tubes, this is what the theory says you'd find. The upward push from the charge fields would be way, way stronger than the downward pull of gravity. In that tiny little space, the elevator's push just overpowers everything else. This push from below idea also neatly solves a huge problem with the old theory called cavitation. See, if you pull on a column of water hard enough, like a drinking straw, it can break and form air bubbles, which would stop the whole process. But if you're pushing the water up from the bottom, there's no tension. No tension, no bubbles. Problem solved. Okay, fine. So there's a powerful elevator that's always going up. That explains how things get to the top leaves. But plants also have to send sugar and nutrients down to the roots. How does anything get off the elevator and go to a lower floor? Well, the theory proposes that the plant is actually smart enough to turn the elevator off when it needs to. It says there are these special cells right next to the transport tubes that can create their own little charge field, one that runs sideways. This sideways force messes up the main upward flow and basically shorts out the elevator in that one specific tube. And once that upward push is switched off, what's the only major force left acting on the sap? Gravity. With the elevator out of service, things just fall. The plant doesn't need a whole new system to push things down. It just turns off the up button and lets gravity do all the work. It's so simple. So let's just put these two ideas side by side for a second. The old textbook model is all about pressure and osmosis, creating this passive pull up and a totally separate push down. The new theory just throws all that out. It says there's one active push up from a charge field, and gravity handles the trip down whenever that push gets turned off. It is a complete 180-degree shift in thinking. Ultimately, what this paper is arguing is that we've been looking in the wrong place for 100 years. The answer isn't in some complicated, contradictory system of pressures. The answer, it claims, is much more fundamental. It's in the physics of charge. You know, it's an absolutely fascinating and radical idea that reframes a whole century of biology. It suggests that plants aren't just these passive plumbing systems, but that they're actively manipulating a fundamental force of the universe. And it really leaves you with this one huge question. If this hidden force isn't real, what else is it doing that we haven't seen?